All the major festivals are that way.
Yeah.
I mean, Berlin is that way. Cannes is that way. Sundance certainly is that way.
I don't remember Locarno being that way this year.
No, Locarno's not that way.
No, Locarno's a different
Yeah.
thing altogether, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to see that some of the films from there also made it here, and they tend to be some of the more interesting movies, whether it's Bruce LaBruce's LA Zombie. There's some movies at Locarno that are also conspicuous by their absence, but we don't have to go into those. I think that what might be fun to do now is maybe we can start with Bob. Just get me and come back to me later. Maybe just a couple minutes, not too much, on a film you saw that you feel passionately about one way or the other, and if other people have seen it, they're free to jump in and disagree or agree heartily.
That
you've seen since you arrived here.
Since I arrived here.
Because we could all talk about, or most of us could talk about after Chatapong, and maybe we'll do that at the end. But
because, unfortunately for me, I have to say that what I have both seen for assignment and seen electively has been largely disappointing. Or I can't comment on it.
Yeah. You're passionate about the John Sayles film?
Yeah, can you hone in quickly on one film, maybe not John Sayles because it's not worth talking about?
No, John Sayles isn't worth talking about. But, I'd say FUBAR II is one that obviously that, audiences in Canada are going to see. Audiences in America will not see it because they don't care.
What is it? I don't even know.
It's Midnight Madness is over.
Right, I know that. I don't know what it is.
Well, yeah, if you know, I mean, the
FUBAR II is the carry-on of Terry and Dean from FUBAR I. Terry and Dean are hosers from Alberta.
Well, more specifically, Calgary headbangers.
That's right.
Jason knows of what he speaks.
Yeah, I mean, I call them Alberta hosers. Jason calls them Calgary headbangers, and both are true. Then one isn't mutually exclusive. And they end up this time. They end up landing jobs, as it were, in the oil sands area of Alberta. Where the town of Fort McMurray is located, and this massive industrial landscape, which Peter Mettler memorably recorded in his masterpiece Petropolis, which now we see at ground level in a really a wonderfully realized and serious-minded and yet completely anarchic and crazy comedy.
Yeah.
FUBAR II does it better than FUBAR I, manages to balance completely anarchic comedy with actually serious-minded topics such as cancer.
Instant pull quote right here.
Yeah, I mean, it laughs at cancer. It's one of the most wonderful aspects of it. Anyone who's gone through, say, a loved one. My wife went through breast cancer and is a survivor. And any movie that can laugh at cancer, to me, is just a huge achievement.
And actually, and also, not just that, but it's also just a really... I remember Mark Parenson going on at length about the Lubitchian qualities of role models. And again, you have actually a really lovely...
Lubitchian and the Strobian.
Yes, the Strobians. But again, you have a very humane comedy. You actually have a really empathetic attitude towards people who would otherwise be treated as buffoons and villains and stock characters in other films.
I would add also that FUBAR II fills a void that's currently existing in American movie comedy, where American movie comedy doesn't really have blue-collar characters. It doesn't focus on blue-collar characters.
They all live in Judd Apatow houses without any
Right. It's very much middle class or upper class. And
middle class.
And middle class. And
millionaire class.
These guys are absolute deep blue collar, and it really captures that milieu really well. I think that unfortunately it's a film that will be ignored outside of Canada, but in Canada it'll be a huge hit.
I think, like FUBAR, the first one, it will gain some traction with the sort of very kind of hardcore comedy cultists, but it's hard to see beyond.
We'll move on from FUBAR. Fernando.
Well, because I've been on the mainstream beat, not much has been gone beyond the mediocre, but there was one film that did kind of tickle my undercarriage, so to speak.
This is the quote of the year so far.
The Alexa de la Iglesia Balada Triste de Trompeta,
which just won Best Director in Venice and Screenplay as well.
aka The Last Circus, which
Another clown.
Which is
Oh, you saw it?
No, I didn't.
No.
I'm just highly skeptical, but I'm willing to be convinced.
Well, it's it is very blatantly a Franco era parable, and that's in itself a subgenre of Spanish cinema. Carlos Saura has made a career out of it. But it's if Carlos Saura is the poet of that genre, De La Iglesia is the deranged agitator of it.
The bad boy.
He so degrades it.
What's Guillermo del Toro?
What?
What's Guillermo del Toro?
Guillermo del-
The Faker?
No comment.
No comment.
Guillermo del Toro. I mean, this movie shows what a safe movie Pan's Labyrinth really is. It's about two clowns. It's a tug of war between two clowns who have a acrobat in the middle who is clearly the soul of Spain. And to
It
his
sounds like a funny cartoon. Big Top Money, that was a good one.
and to his credit, if that is the soul of Spain, he give him credit for making her just the most lewd woman I've seen at the festival. She thoroughly enjoys her own vile punishment in this movie.
When's the screening again?
Tuesday night.
Tuesday night.
I'm going to see it then. Yeah.
Lewd women lure Danny in like nobody's business.
Keeping concision in mind, Andrew?
I'm sure that we will have other comment about this. I will say briefly, and I'm a little surprised, that the Godard film, Film Socialism, is, at least the first 45 minutes or so, are some of those gorgeous things I've seen all year. I'd like to comment really briefly, though, on something. Neither of these films are obscure at all, but it's something that I find kind of interesting when I come to the festival each year, is that I find that, perhaps I'm just speaking for myself, I come to find new kinds of experiences and new kinds of ways of conceiving of cinema. So in the last few years, I've been discovering people like Lisandro Alonso, rapper Sarah. This is very important. And
Grand Rio for the
Grand Rio, of course.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to find really good narrative films. And I say narrative in a way like these are traditional narrative films that are excellent. And I find it's very interesting because a lot of very good critics, like the people at this table, often have a bit of trouble kind of quantifying or qualifying why they like these films, other than the fact that, and this just makes us sound like lousy crowd or old hacks, it's well acted and well directed and things like that. I was thinking specifically, by the way, I should have said this up front, of films like Xavier Beauvois' Of Gods and Men, and also of Li Changdong's poetry. These are films that have characters and a certain amount of psychology and themes and motifs and very
script based.
Very script based. Like, and I once again, I don't mean this pejoratively. These are very literary kind of filmmakers in the sense that they are based off of a script. They're based off of a narrative design that they follow all the way through. And I think it's really interesting to see otherwise smart critics trying to wrestle with these films and trying to stack them up against things that are much more kind of ostentatious in the way they're playing with conventions of cinema. So for instance, I saw Poetry, Li Changdong's film, right after I saw Denis Cote's Curling, which I also liked. And it was such a fascinating kind of contrast, because Cote is somebody who's very much about, I suppose you could call something like almost like a phenomenological kind of cinema. He's interested in looking at people in space doing things. There's a narrative, but it's very pointedly elliptical, and sometimes I would almost say a little artificially elliptical. And then you get something like Poetry, which is completely about one character who we follow all the way through, and who, even if they remain a bit of a mystery, we have pretty good ideas about why she acts the way she does. I found this a really fascinating contrast to have these two kind of films next to each other, both of which are equally good. But it's this, I find year after year that narrative films get kind of the least amount of attention, and often critics have, well, I'll just repeat myself again, critics have a hard time dealing with them, especially since we're always on the lookout for new forms.
I don't think narrative's the issue. I think all these films have narrative. The films you're talking about and the
I
films
suppose
you're talking about.
perhaps traditional narrative.
I don't think it's a storytelling technique. I think it's a formal technique. I think it's the storytelling in poetry or Gods of Men is probably not different from the storytelling in Liverpool. It's like storytelling, not a narrative. I'm not talking about character development.
I would say that both are telling a story, but they're doing so in radically different ways. And things like Poetry and Of Gods and Men in a much more, dare I say, conventional, but still no less affecting, intelligent, very focused and purposeful kind of way.
I agree.